Close your eyes and listen to the gentle rhythm of the rain. Let each drop carry you back through time to a world dimly lit by candlelight, where the glow of knowledge was still rare and fragile. Tonight, we begin the story of a woman whose brilliance broke through the darkness, whose quiet strength defied the odds, and whose discoveries forever changed the course of science and medicine. This is the story of Marie Curie, the woman who glowed with knowledge. At a time when science was considered a man's domain, she stood unwavering, guided not by fame or fortune, but by an unshakable curiosity. Born into a world where her path was expected to be small, she carved out one that reached the stars. From the silent libraries of Warsaw to the bustling laboratories of Paris, her life was a journey of resistance, perseverance, and discovery. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Hopefully, our story helps any of you struggling to sleep. Insomnia isn't pretty. If there's a specific genre or story you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below. If enough people are interested, I'll make it happen as soon as possible. Now, grab a blanket, turn off the lights as always, and let's begin. She would uncover elements no one had ever seen, walk into the unknown without fear, and leave behind a legacy not only of scientific achievement but of courage, determination, and humility. Her work would bring light to the invisible, revealing powers hidden within matter itself, forces both miraculous and deadly. So, let your breath slow. Let the world grow quiet around you. And as the soft murmur of rain lingers in your ears, allow yourself to be carried into the past, to a time of chalkboards and cold laboratories, of glowing vials and silent sacrifices. Tonight, we step into the luminous life of Marie Curie, a life that, like the elements she discovered, still radiates through the world today. The year was 1867. In the heart of Warsaw, beneath the gray skies of Russian-occupied Poland, a baby girl was born into a world of quiet resistance. Her name was Maria Skłodowska. From the beginning, Maria's life was shaped by two powerful forces: oppression and education. Her homeland was not free. Polish language and culture were suppressed. Schools were heavily monitored. And for girls, the path to learning was narrow and steep. But within the walls of her family's modest home, another world unfolded, one where ideas flowed freely, where books lined the shelves, and where the hunger for knowledge was not only allowed but encouraged. Her father, Władysław, was a teacher of mathematics and physics. Though stripped of his post by the Russian authorities, he filled their home with the tools of learning: scientific instruments, worn textbooks, and quiet encouragement. He would point to the stars, to the patterns of numbers, to the beauty of natural laws, and Maria listened with wonder. Her mother, Bronisława, was equally inspiring, a school principal and educator known for her discipline and grace. But life was not easy for the Skłodowska family. Illness and sorrow hung quietly in the background. Maria lost her sister to typhus and her mother to tuberculosis before she was even 10. Loss settled into her young heart, but instead of dimming her spirit, it sharpened her resolve. From an early age, Maria excelled in school. Her notebooks overflowed with neat, careful lines. Her questions were endless. But in Warsaw, her potential had limits. As a girl under Russian rule, she could not attend university. The doors of higher education were firmly shut. Still, Maria did not stop. She joined the Flying University, a secret underground network of lecturers who taught forbidden subjects in private homes. By candlelight and behind closed doors, she studied chemistry, physics, and philosophy. Every lesson was an act of quiet rebellion. Every book, a torch passed in the dark. Maria's dream burned brighter than her circumstances. She wanted to understand the world, not just accept it, and she knew that to do so she would have to leave behind everything she knew: her home, her family, her country. She worked as a governess to save money, sending her earnings to support her sister Branya's education in Paris, with the promise that one day Branya would do the same for her. Years passed. Maria waited, studied, dreamed. And then, when the time finally came, she boarded a train bound for France. She carried with her a few belongings, an iron will, and a mind that would not be silenced. But Warsaw could not hold her ambitions. To truly pursue science, she would have to leave everything behind and journey to a city where minds were free to explore. The city of Paris. Paris. A city of dreams, of revolution, of ideas dancing through the streets like autumn leaves in the wind. It was here, among towering cathedrals, crowded cafes, and candlelit libraries, that Maria Sklodowska, now calling herself Marie, would begin the most difficult and transformative chapter of her life. She arrived with little more than a suitcase, and the unshakable determination that had carried her across borders. Paris welcomed many minds, but not all equally. For a young Polish woman, alone and poor, the path to knowledge would be lined with hardship. Still, Marie had no interest in ease, only in excellence. She enrolled at the Sorbonne, one of the most prestigious universities in all of Europe. She studied physics and mathematics, surrounded by men who often viewed her with quiet skepticism. Some doubted her place in the lecture halls. Others ignored her entirely. But Marie didn't come for their approval. She came for the truth hidden in formulas, the patterns buried in the natural world. She rented a tiny attic room, bare, drafty, barely insulated from the cold. In winter, she would wrap herself in every piece of clothing she owned, her breath visible in the freezing air. Dinner was often a crust of bread and tea, and on the hardest nights nothing at all. By day, she sat in the front rows of her lectures, scribbling notes furiously. By night, she studied by candlelight, translating textbooks from French into Polish, solving equations until her fingers grew numb. There were times when the hunger, the cold, the exhaustion overwhelmed her. But she never left. She never gave up. In her solitude, Marie developed a kind of quiet power. Every theorem she mastered, every concept she unlocked was a triumph not just of intellect, but of resistance. Against poverty, against doubt, against centuries of exclusion. She did not see herself as a pioneer. She saw herself as a student, endlessly curious, endlessly striving. But in truth, every step she took into the halls of science cracked open the door for the women who would follow. Despite all the obstacles, she excelled. In 1893, Marie earned a degree in physics, first in her class. A year later, she received another in mathematics. Her professors were stunned by her brilliance. Behind her quiet demeanor was a mind of extraordinary depth, precision, and imagination. And yet, recognition was not what she sought. Her satisfaction came not from praise, but from discovery. It was during this time that she began looking for a laboratory to continue her research. Space was scarce, and women were rarely granted access to proper facilities. But Marie persevered, taking what she could get, often working in cramped, under-equipped rooms that others had long abandoned. Still, she pressed on. Little did she know, her greatest discovery was not yet to be found in the lab, but in the form of a person. In 1894, through a fellow scientist, Marie was introduced to a physicist named Pierre Curie. Quiet, unassuming, and deeply devoted to his work, Pierre was captivated not only by Marie's intellect, but by the quiet intensity with which she pursued her goals. Their connection was instant, like two elements that, when combined, sparked something entirely new. Pierre believed in equality, in partnership. He saw Marie not as a woman in science, but as a scientist, one of the finest minds he had ever met. Their bond was forged not only in mutual respect, but in shared wonder. They dreamed of uncovering the universe's secrets together, of asking questions that had yet to be spoken aloud. In 1895, they were married. Their wedding was modest, no white dress, no grand celebration. Marie wore a simple dark suit, practical and plain. What mattered to them wasn't the ceremony, but the work they would do, side by side. Little did she know that her greatest discovery was yet to come, not in a laboratory, but in the form of a man named Pierre Curie. Together, they would illuminate the invisible and forever change the world of science. Some partnerships are written in textbooks, others are written in the stars. When Marie and Pierre Curie came together, it was as if the universe had aligned two brilliant minds for a single, extraordinary purpose. Their union was not one of grand declarations or romantic fanfare. It was quiet, steady, like the pulse of a laboratory clock. Yet, within that silence, something powerful stirred. They were partners not just in life, but in thought, in discovery, in the very pursuit of truth. Where Marie was methodical, precise, and tireless, Pierre brought vision, sensitivity, and deep philosophical wonder. Together, they formed a balance, a kind of scientific harmony that few ever find. Their conversations stretched late into the night, filled with the language of atoms and possibilities. They lived modestly, sharing a love not of material wealth, but of curiosity. For their honeymoon, they took a bicycle tour through the French countryside. No jewels, no lavish trips, just open roads, clear skies, and minds dreaming of invisible worlds waiting to be uncovered. By the late 1890s, the scientific world was still reeling from the recent discovery of X-rays and radioactivity, terms that were just beginning to find their place in the lexicon of science. Inspired by the work of Henri Becquerel, who found that uranium emitted invisible rays, Marie grew fascinated with the idea that certain elements might be releasing energy from within, something unseen yet profoundly real. With Pierre's encouragement, she chose this mysterious phenomenon as the focus of her doctoral research. A bold move for a woman in a field almost entirely dominated by men. The Curies worked side by side in an old, drafty shed behind the School of Physics and Chemistry in Paris. The roof leaked when it rained. The walls were bare. The space was poorly ventilated, and the equipment was rudimentary at best. Yet, in that humble laboratory, history was being made. Marie began testing a variety of materials, searching for signs of this strange, penetrating energy. Through tireless experimentation, she discovered that one particular mineral, pitchblende, was far more radioactive than uranium itself. It was a clue, a whisper of something hidden. What if the pitchblende contained undiscovered elements, unknown substances giving off this powerful energy? For months, Marie and Pierre crushed, boiled, filtered, and crystallized tons of pitchblende ore. The work was grueling, their hands often blackened by chemicals, their bodies exposed to invisible rays whose dangers were not yet understood. But they pressed on, hour after hour, year after year, and then discovery. In 1898, they announced the identification of two new elements, polonium, named by Marie in honor of her beloved homeland, Poland, which remained partitioned and oppressed, and radium, named for the Latin word radius, meaning ray. These elements did more than glow in the dark. They defied everything science thought it knew about matter and energy. They were alive, in a sense, releasing heat and light without end, as though fueled by a secret fire from within. The scientific world took notice. Suddenly, the name Curie was on every physicist's lips. In 1903, Marie and Pierre, along with Henri Becquerel, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, making Marie the first woman in history to receive the prestigious honor. But beyond the medals and headlines, what mattered most to Marie and Pierre was the truth they had uncovered. Their joy lay not in fame, but in the wonder of discovery. They refused to patent their process, believing that knowledge should belong to everyone. "Radium is for the service of humanity," Marie once said. And so it was. Their findings would go on to transform medicine, leading to radiation therapy and countless innovations. Yet, even as the world praised them, the Curies remained humble. They continued to live simply, to teach, to work, always driven by the same quiet purpose that had brought them together in the first place. Two hearts, two minds, one radiant pursuit. The glow of radium fascinated the world, but what no one knew was that this discovery came at a great cost, a cost that Marie and Pierre would soon pay. The glow of radium had dazzled the world, but behind its luminous beauty lay an unseen danger, a silent force that seeped into the bones, into the blood, into the very lives of those who studied it. And in the quiet shadow of success, tragedy was waiting. It was a rainy afternoon in 1906 when the world shifted for Marie Curie. Pierre had been walking through the busy streets of Paris, lost in thought, as he often was, when he stepped into the path of an oncoming horse-drawn carriage. In an instant, everything ended. The man who had walked beside her in science and in life was gone. Marie, now 38, was left standing on the edge of an unimaginable void. Pierre had been more than her husband. He was her colleague, her co-discoverer, her partner in both heart and thought. Without him, the world felt cold and unfamiliar. Friends worried for her. She withdrew from public life, overcome with grief. In the weeks that followed, she filled pages with aching journal entries written to Pierre as if he were still alive. "I feel like I am wandering in a world unknown, without light, without direction," she wrote. But even in mourning, Marie found purpose. Her sorrow became fuel. If Pierre could not continue their work, then she would carry it forward, for both of them. In a world where women were rarely seen in laboratories, let alone leading them, Marie did the unthinkable. She took over Pierre's position at the Sorbonne, becoming the first female professor in the university's history. She walked into lecture halls filled with young men who had never been taught by a woman, stood behind Pierre's old podium, and began to teach the mysteries of physics, her voice calm, her mind sharp. She was no longer a pair, but a singular force, commanding respect not with demands, but with depth, discipline, and quiet brilliance. It was not easy. The scientific community, though impressed by her intellect, remained wary. She was a widow, a mother of two, a foreign woman in a French institution. Many whispered that she would fade away without Pierre. But Marie had no intention of fading. She plunged into her research with renewed intensity. She continued her studies of radioactive elements, isolating pure radium, a feat so delicate and precise that it would take 4 years of continuous effort. In 1911, she was awarded her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her discovery of radium and polonium and her further exploration of radioactivity. She became the first person, and to this day, one of the very few, to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. The honor was profound, but Marie accepted it with humility. For her, the accolades were never the goal. What mattered was the pursuit of knowledge, the deeper understanding of nature's secrets. But even as she advanced science, the elements she studied were quietly working against her. Marie often handled radium with her bare hands. She kept glowing vials of the substance in her desk drawers, enchanted by its beauty. No one yet understood the risks. There were no safety protocols, no protective equipment, and the price of this ignorance was high. Her health began to deteriorate. She suffered from fatigue, chronic pain, and symptoms no one could yet trace to radiation exposure. But still, she continued. She could not bring herself to step away, not when there was still more to learn, more to do. She faced criticism, too, especially from the press. When rumors emerged of a relationship with a fellow scientist years after Pierre's death, the public response was swift and cruel. Marie, now a two-time Nobel laureate, was reduced in the tabloids to little more than scandal. But she never defended herself publicly. Instead, she went on stage to accept her Nobel Prize and then returned to her laboratory. Science, for her, was sanctuary. Despite the grief, the criticism, and the slow toll of radiation on her body, Marie Curie pressed forward. She raised her daughters with care and intellect, passing on to them the same love of learning that had been gifted to her as a child in Warsaw. Her daughter, Irene, would go on to become a Nobel Prize-winning scientist herself, a living extension of her mother's legacy. Marie Curie stood alone in the world of science, but never wavered. She proved again and again that brilliance knows no gender, and that determination, when paired with compassion, can change the course of history. But the very element that made her famous was also slowly destroying her. Radium's glow was beautiful, but its touch was deadly. Marie Curie never slowed down. Even as her body began to weaken, even as her hands trembled from the effects of radiation, her mind remained luminous, focused, questioning, endlessly devoted to discovery. The woman who once crushed tons of pitchblende with her own hands now worked with delicate X-ray machines and scientific instruments that would save lives instead of merely studying them. When World War I broke out, she did not retreat into safety or solitude. Instead, she turned her brilliance toward service. Together with her daughter Irene, Marie developed mobile X-ray units, which she personally drove to the front lines. These little Curies, as they were affectionately called, helped doctors locate bullets and broken bones on the battlefield, revolutionizing battlefield medicine and saving thousands of lives. She trained over 100 women to operate the machines, empowering others with both knowledge and purpose. Though the war raged around her, Marie remained steady, calm, and practical. She never sought recognition for this work. In fact, she often paid for equipment herself, selling her Nobel medals to fund more mobile units. Though she continued her research, the effects of long-term radiation exposure became harder to ignore. She suffered from fatigue, anemia, and frailty. In an era before protective measures, she had unknowingly absorbed years of radiation, its invisible hand slowly diminishing her body even as it illuminated the world. Still, she never expressed regret. In interviews and lectures, she spoke only of the joy of discovery, of the responsibility of scientists to use their knowledge for good. Her life had not been easy, but it had been meaningful. Marie Curie passed away on July 4th, 1934, in a quiet clinic in the French Alps. The cause, aplastic anemia, almost certainly brought on by her years of exposure to radioactive elements. She was laid to rest beside Pierre, their ashes later transferred to the Pantheon in Paris, a resting place for France's most honored citizens. She became the first woman ever laid to rest there on her own merits. Even now, Marie Curie's notebooks remain radioactive, stored in lead-lined boxes, a haunting symbol of the price she paid in pursuit of knowledge. But her true legacy is not in glowing pages or medals. It is in the generations of scientists she inspired, the women who dared to follow her path, the lives saved by the medical applications of her research. She did not seek to become a legend. She simply followed her curiosity with unshakable devotion. And in doing so, she became more than a scientist. She became a beacon, proof that passion, perseverance, and courage can illuminate even the darkest corners of the unknown. Though she left this world, her discoveries remain. Her name, her brilliance, and her courage continue to inspire generations of scientists and dreamers. Marie Curie's life is more than a story from the past. It is a shining thread woven into the fabric of our present. Her journey, marked by struggle, brilliance, and sacrifice, continues to echo across time, offering lessons that reach far beyond the walls of any laboratory. At a time when women were expected to remain silent in the world of science, Marie chose to speak through her work. She reminds us that true passion knows no limits, no borders, no barriers. She was not invited into the world of discovery. She carved a path into it, one painstaking step at a time. Her legacy teaches us that the pursuit of knowledge is not just an academic goal. It is a moral act, a commitment to bettering humanity. Whether she was discovering new elements or saving lives on the battlefield, Marie's work was never about recognition. It was about purpose. She faced exclusion, loss, poverty, and illness. Yet she never stopped. Her resilience shows us that greatness is not found in moments of ease, but in what we choose to do when the world says no. When the door is closed, she teaches us to build our own. And then there is her quiet courage. Marie Curie never sought fame. She never demanded applause. Her strength lay in persistence, in humility, in her unshakable belief that curiosity, when followed with integrity, can change the world. We live in an age shaped by her discoveries. Medical treatments, nuclear science, diagnostic imaging, all glowing echoes of her once radical ideas. But more than her science, it is her spirit we remember. The little girl in Warsaw who dreamed of knowledge, the woman in Paris who lit the darkness, the scientist who glowed with more than radiation. She glowed with the power of knowing. As you drift into sleep, let Marie Curie's story remind you that brilliance isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, determined, and eternal.